I came home late every night until someone hid spikes under my tires and learned who I really was. I used to come home late every night, long after the neighborhood lights dimmed and the quiet settled like a hell breath. My work demanded it. Some missions ended at dawn. Others began when normal people slept. The HOA didn't care. They never do, especially not Karen. She noticed my schedule before she noticed my name. The way my headlights swept across manicured lawns at 2 a.m., the soft click of my garage door, the fact that I didn't wave, didn't chat, didn't attend meetings. To her, that made me suspicious. To me, it was survival. I live in a place obsessed with order. Same paint colors, same hedges trimmed to identical heights, same smiles at the mailbox. Karen was the self-appointed guardian of that order. She wore like a badge, though no one ever gave it to her. Clipboard, phone camera, HOA bylaws memorized like scripture. She watched from behind curtains and blinds, documenting every perceived violation. At first, it was notes. Polite, passive-aggressive notes tucked under my windshield wiper. Please be mindful of noise after 10 p.m. I ignored them. Then came emails. Your arrival time is disruptive to the community. I archived them. She escalated to confrontations, waiting near my driveway, arms crossed, eyes sharp with accusation. You think rules don't apply to you, she said one night, blocking my path. I follow the law. I replied, calm, measured. The HOA is the law here. That was when I knew she'd become dangerous. People like Karen don't see boundaries. They see obstacles. When words fail, they act, and they justify it to themselves as righteous enforcement. The night it happened was like any other. Rain slicked the asphalt, reflecting streetlights in long golden streaks. I turned into my driveway, tired but alert. Training never leaves you. As I stepped out of the car, something felt off. Attention, subtle, wrong. I didn't move. I scanned the ground slowly. There, barely visible in the wet darkness, metal glinted. Small, cruel shapes arranged deliberately beneath my tires. Spikes. Someone had hidden them carefully, angled to puncture when the car rolled forward in the morning. Not vandalism. Sabotage. I felt a familiar calm settle in. Fear is loud. Training is quiet. I crouched, photographed the spikes, then carefully removed them with gloves from my trunk kit. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I walked inside, dried off, and sat in my control room. Yes, control room. Karen didn't know that my house wasn't just a house. It was layered with surveillance. Exterior cameras, infrared motion-triggered, overlapping angles. I installed them myself, using protocols I'd applied across borders. Interpol work teaches you one thing fast. Trust systems, not assumptions. I pulled up the footage. Time-stamped scroll back. Midnight, 12:47 a.m. A figure entered the frame from across the street. Hood up, posture tense. She moved like someone who believed she was unseen. But cameras don't blink. Karen knelt by my car. She looked around, then carefully placed the spikes. Methodical, confident. She even smiled. I leaned back, exhaled once, and saved the clips. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was criminal. As dawn approached, I prepared. Evidence packaged. Reports drafted. I'd handled warlords with less arrogance than this woman. The difference was jurisdiction and patience. By morning, the neighborhood buzzed. Karen stood on her porch, coffee in hand, watching, waiting for the sound of damage. It never came. Instead, I walked out calm, carrying a folder. Morning, I said. Her smile faltered. We need to talk, I continued. About last night. She laughed nervously. I don't know what you're talking about. I opened the folder, just enough for her to see a still frame. Her face, clear, unmistakable. Color drained from her skin. You put spikes under my car, I said softly. That's felony sabotage. She stammered excuses. HOA authority. Safety. Noise. I let her finish. Then I said, you made a mistake assuming who I am. I showed her the badge. Interpol. The word landed like a verdict. Neighbors emerged, drawn by the tension. Phones came out. Whispers spread. I documented everything. I said, and I don't tolerate threats. Karen's knees buckled. Authority evaporated. This was only the beginning. I didn't raise my voice. I never do when the truth is enough. Karen tried to regain footing, shifting from denial to outrage in seconds. She accused me of harassment, of spying, of intimidation. Classic deflection. I recorded the interaction with my phone. Steady hands, neutral expression. Evidence loves neutrality. The HOA president arrived, summoned by Karen's frantic messages. He looked tired, unprepared for real conflict. When I briefed him calmly, his posture changed. He saw the footage. He heard the timestamps. He understood liability. Call your lawyer. I advised him. And the police. Karen protested. She always had, every time consequences approached. But this wasn't a warning letter or a fine. This was intent to harm. She crossed a line that couldn't be painted over with bylaws. Police arrived within minutes. I handed over copies, unedited. They examined the spikes, the placement, the footage. Their questions were procedural, respectful. Karen's were frantic. As she was escorted away, she screamed about rights, about harassment, about how this neighborhood was hers. No one answered. Power, once exposed, looked small. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. The HOA issued apologies. Meetings were postponed. Karen's house went dark. I filed additional reports, not because I needed to, but because thoroughness is habit. People stopped avoiding me. They waved. They asked polite questions they never dared before. Late nights, cameras, silence. I didn't explain. I never do. One evening, I came home early. The sun was still up. I stood in my driveway and looked around. Order returned, but it was different now. Honest. Karen never came back. Charges stuck. Evidence does that. I still come home late. I still move quietly. But now, when headlights sweep across lawns, curtains stay still. And the spikes? They sit in an evidence locker, tagged and sealed. A reminder that arrogance leaves traces. I review my cameras every night. Not because I'm afraid, because I'm prepared. Preparation is misunderstood by people like Karen. They think it's paranoia or secrecy or ego. For me, it's responsibility. Interpol doesn't recruit people who react. They recruit those who anticipate. I've seen what happens when small acts go unchecked, when petty authority hardens into belief. In other countries, it starts with notes and rules too. Then it escalates. Someone gets hurt. Someone disappears. The scale changes, but the pattern doesn't. That's why I didn't confront her the first time. Or the second. Observation tells you more than conflict ever will. My cameras weren't installed because I feared crime. They were installed because I study behavior. Patterns. Timing. Intent. Karen provided all three. She walked the neighborhood every night at the same time. She checked driveways, bins, lawns. She cataloged violations like trophies. She believed surveillance equaled control. She never imagined she was the one being observed. When I sent my report through proper channels, it was concise. Facts only. No emotion. That's how cases survive scrutiny. That's how truth holds up. Some neighbors later apologized for not stepping in earlier. I told them the same thing I tell witnesses everywhere. Silence is a lesson, too. You learn who feels entitled when no one speaks. The HOA rewrote its rules. Cameras became acceptable. Quiet hours were clarified. Accountability crept in. I didn't stay for the meeting. I never do. That night, I came home at 2 a.m. again. Same headlights. Same garage door. But the street felt different. Lighter. I stood for a moment, listening. No footsteps. No whispers. Just wind through trees. I checked the ground out of habit. Nothing there. I went inside, locked the door, and filed the day away in my mind where all completed operations go. Closed. Documented. Done. Tomorrow, there would be another boarder, another case, another face convinced rules bent for them. But here, in this neighborhood, the message was clear. Some lines don't bend. They break. I slept well that night. Not because justice was served, but because the system worked when challenged. It always does when evidence leads and ego steps aside. Weeks later, a new family moved into Karen's house. They smiled, they waved, they planted flowers without measuring distances. The HOA tried to correct them once. It didn't last. People remembered. Sometimes the strongest enforcement isn't punishment, it's exposure. I keep my badge locked away now, out of sight, not because I'm hiding, but because identity should never be a threat. Action should. If Karen had truly asked, why I came home late, I might have answered. Or maybe not. Some truths are earned, not demanded. The spikes changed nothing about my routine. I still check mirrors. I still scan ground. I still trust systems over people. But they change the neighborhood. Fear lost. And that's enough. Every operation ends with lessons learned. This one was no different. Authority without oversight decays. Curiosity without humility corrodes. And power, when borrowed, is always temporary. I archived the footage, backed it up twice, then once more off-site. Old habits. Good ones. Some nights, when rain hits the pavement just right, I remember the glint of metal under my tires. A small decision that could have had permanent consequences. Karen wanted control. She got clarity instead. I turn off the lights, set the alarm, and rest. Morning will come. So will night. And I'll be ready. Readiness is quiet. It doesn't announce itself or seek approval. It waits, patient and precise, until truth demands presence. I live that way because experience insists on it. The world tests boundaries daily, in small neighborhoods and distant borders alike. When tested, systems reveal their strength. That night, mine held. Not because I am extraordinary, but because preparation is ordinary to me. Cameras watched. Records spoke. Law responded. Order returned. And life continued, calmer, clearer, correct. Lines matter. Respect matters. And when someone forgets that, reminders arrive, sometimes quietly, sometimes officially. Either way, consequences teach better than warnings ever will. That lesson settled here, permanently, long after Karen was gone. No exceptions remain. Anywhere. Always. The aftermath didn't explode the way Karen expected. There was no shouting match in the street, no dramatic arrest broadcast the entire neighborhood, no gossip-filled HOA email dripping with outrage. Instead, there was silence, the kind that presses on people who are used to being loud. Silence is uncomfortable for those who thrive on control. For me, it was familiar. 3 days after the incident, an unmarked sedan parked across from my house at 6:12 a.m. I noticed at the moment its engine cut. I always do. 2 men stepped out, both trying too hard to look casual. They didn't knock. They waited. That told me everything. I opened the door before they decided how to approach. "Morning," I said. They straightened instantly. "Sir," the tall one replied, showing credentials. "Local law enforcement. We'd like to ask a few follow-up questions." "Of course," I said, stepping aside. Inside, they looked around with restrained curiosity. They didn't comment on the reinforced door frame, the lack of clutter, or the subtle hum of equipment behind the walls. Professionals notice these things even when they pretend not to. They asked about the footage, the spikes, Karen's behavior prior to the incident. I answered factually, without embellishment. When they asked why I hadn't reported earlier harassment, I gave them the truth. Because escalation reveals intent, I said, and intent is what matters. They exchanged a glance. Not disagreement, recognition. After they left, I reviewed my external cameras again. Karen's house remained dark. No movement. No curtains twitching. Absence can be louder than presence. The HOA, however, couldn't stay quiet. By the end of the week, a certified letter arrived. Not a warning. An apology. Carefully worded, legally reviewed, desperate to limit liability. They acknowledged an incident involving a board member acting independently. They assured me new procedures were being drafted. Procedures are promises people make after consequences. I filed the letter away and went on with my life. That night, I came home later than usual. Nearly 3 a.m. The streetlights flickered as I passed beneath them. Every driveway was empty except mine. I parked slowly, deliberately, giving anyone watching time to see that I was unbothered. I checked the ground. Clean. Inside, I pulled at my feeds. Motion logs showed nothing unusual. But behavior isn't always about action. Sometimes it's about interruption. Karen had been the neighborhood's constant. Her absence disrupted the pattern. And disruption creates opportunity. 2 houses down, a man stood on his porch pretending to check his phone. He'd never done that before. Across the street, a curtain moved slightly, then stilled. People were watching me now, not with suspicion, with curiosity. Fear had changed direction. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for following Tuesday. Attendance mandatory, according to the email. I went, not because I was obligated, but because information travels fastest in rooms full of people pretending not to listen. The meeting room buzzed when I entered. Conversation stalled. Chairs shifted. Someone cleared their throat. I took a seat near the back, unobtrusive by design. The HOA president opened with a statement about recent events. He avoided names. Karen's name, especially. He spoke about safety, trust, and community values. Words designed to soothe without admitting fault. Then questions began. Someone asked why Karen was no longer on the board. Another asked if charges were real. A third asked quietly whether surveillance cameras were now allowed. That one landed. The president hesitated. He glanced at his notes. Then at me. Yes, he said carefully. Homeowners may install cameras within legal limits. Murmurs spread. Relief. Vindication. Power shifting. I raised my hand. The room froze. I want to be clear, I said when acknowledged. My voice was calm, steady, carrying without effort. I didn't install cameras because of this neighborhood. I installed them because of the world. Silence followed. People leaned in despite themselves. What happened wasn't an HOA issue. I continued. It was a criminal act. It would have been one anywhere. I let that settle. If anyone here believes authority justifies harm, I added, they should reconsider their position. No one spoke. The meeting ended early. Afterward, 3 neighbors approached me. One apologized for ignoring Karen's behavior. Another admitted she'd been fined unfairly years ago. The third simply said thank you. I accepted all 3 without comment. The world teaches you early that validation is unnecessary when outcomes are clear. That weekend, Karen's house was officially listed for sale. No sign, just a quiet posting that appeared online and disappeared again within hours. Legal pressure does that. So does shame. But consequences don't end when the offender leaves. They ripple. 2 nights later, I noticed a car circling the block slowly. It passed once, then again, headlights off. On the 3rd pass, it stopped briefly near Karen's former house. I recorded everything. The driver never exited. He left after 4 minutes. The plates were local but unfamiliar. I ran them through my channels. No immediate flags. But unfamiliarity is information too. The next morning, the HOA president emailed asking if I'd be willing to consult on security improvements. I declined politely. I don't consult where authority once abused itself. They needed to learn without leaning on me. Interpol teaches restraint as much as action. Days passed. The neighborhood settled into a new rhythm. People relaxed. Rules softened. Karen's absence created space for something healthier, though fragile. Then my phone rang. Blocked number. I answered. You ruined my life, Karen said. Her voice was thin, brittle. You did that yourself, I replied. You think you're untouchable, she hissed. With your cameras. Your badge. I think evidence matters, I said. She laughed, sharp and humorless. You don't know who you made enemies with. The line went dead. Threats don't frighten me, but they do inform me. I flagged the call, traced what I could, forwarded the data. Karen was unraveling. People who lose control often grasp for leverage, real or imagined. That night, I doubled my patrol feeds. Not because I expected an attack, but because patterns escalate before they break. At 1:38 a.m., motion triggered near my side yard. A shadow crossed the fence line, then retreated. I zoomed in. A teenager. Curious. Bored. Harmless. Still, I logged it. An hour later, another trigger. This one deliberate. A figure approached the edge of my property and stopped, staring directly at the camera. He raised a hand, waved slowly, then stepped back into darkness. That was new. I enhanced the footage, froze the frame. The man wore a hoodie, face partially visible. Confident, not caring. I forwarded the clip to a contact who owed me favors. Within minutes, a response came back. No criminal record, no local address, but he'd been seen with Karen twice in the past week. That told me enough. She was recruiting sympathy, or backup, or both. I didn't react publicly. I never do. Instead, I adjusted camera angles, increased sensitivity, and altered my arrival time slightly. Predictability is a vulnerability. The following evening, I arrived home early. The street was active. Kids played. Parents talked. Normal life. I parked and walked inside, letting the garage close behind me. 10 minutes later, someone knocked. I didn't answer immediately. I checked the feed. The same man from the footage stood at my door, hands visible, posture rehearsed. I opened the door just enough to speak. Yes. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said, smiling thinly. About Karen? No, I replied. There hasn't. She's under a lot of stress. Stress doesn't justify violence. She didn't mean... This conversation is over, I said. His smile faded. You should be careful, he said quietly. I always am, I replied and closed the door. I saved the footage, backed it up, labeled it precisely. Later that night, I sent a report through official channels, not as a complaint, as documentation. Documentation creates trails. Trails limit options. By morning, the unmarked sedan returned. This time, it didn't wait. They knocked. I invited them in. They received my report. So had others, the shorter officer said. I nodded. Karen's situation was deteriorating rapidly. Restraining orders, additional charges, associates being questioned. She'd assumed her authority, insulated her. Instead, it exposed her. The officers left with copies of everything. The neighborhood woke to news, not gossip. Facts traveled differently. By the end of the week, the circling car stopped. The man at my door disappeared. Karen's calls ceased. Peace returned, cautious but real. I resumed my routine. Late nights, early mornings, quiet vigilance. But something had changed inside the neighborhood. People spoke up now. HOA meetings included dissent. Cameras multiplied. Accountability replaced obedience. All from a few metal spikes under my tires. Small acts reveal character. Responses reveal systems. This system, flawed as it was, corrected itself when confronted with truth. I stood in my driveway one evening, watching the sunset, thinking about how often power is mistaken for permission. Karen made that mistake. Many do. Interpol work taught me something neighborhoods rarely understand. Danger isn't always loud. Sometimes it wears a smile and carries a clipboard. I checked the ground out of habit. Nothing there. I went inside, logged the day, and prepared for what came next. Because consequences don't always arrive immediately. Sometimes they wait. Patient. Exact. Consequences rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly, disguised as normal days, routine movements, ordinary sounds. That's how they test whether vigilance fades once danger seems to pass. I've learned never to assume an ending just because the noise stops. 2 weeks after Karen vanished from the neighborhood, life appeared settled. HOA emails softened in tone. Lawns grew uneven without constant enforcement. People lingered longer outside, talking instead of watching. The tension that once hovered like static had dispersed. But I knew better than to call it peace. Peace is provisional. My work intensified during that period. International coordination, late briefings, early extractions. Borders blur when you operate above them. I'd leave before sunset and return near dawn, slipping back into my driveway like a ghost passing through a familiar wall. The cameras watched. The logs updated. Everything functioned. Until one night, something didn't. At 2:11 a.m., my garage door hesitated. Not enough to alarm most people, but enough for me to notice. Mechanical delays mean interference or failure. I stopped the door manually, stepped out, and scanned the surroundings. Nothing visible. No movement. No sound. Inside, I ran diagnostics. The system showed a brief external signal interruption. Someone had tested the frequency. Not a hack, not yet. A probe. I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled, and considered the implications. Karen had lost power, credibility, and freedom. People like her don't accept that easily. They look for ways to reclaim relevance, even if only through spite. I increased encryption and routed alerts directly to my secure device. Then I waited. The next day, a package appeared on my porch. No return address. Standard cardboard, sealed cleanly. I didn't touch it. I scanned it remotely first. No electronics. No explosives. Just paper. Inside was a single printed photograph. My driveway, taken from across the street. Recent. Someone wanted me to know I was still being watched. I didn't feel threatened. I felt validated. Patterns were aligning. I logged the delivery time, pulled camera footage, and identified the courier vehicle. It wasn't a delivery service. It was private, rented, sloppy. I forwarded the information to my contact network. Within hours, names surfaced. Not criminals, not professionals, friends of friends. People Karen had convinced she'd been wronged, persecuted, humiliated. She was building a narrative. That evening, I attended another HOA meeting. Attendance had doubled, not because people cared more, but because fear had changed shape. They wanted reassurance, structure, someone to tell them everything was fine. I listened. The president spoke about unity, about moving forward, about leaving the past behind. Carefully curated optimism. When questions opened, someone asked if the police investigation was truly over. It is ongoing, I said from my seat. Heads turned. Threats don't expire, I continued. They evolve. Murmurs rippled. Unease returned, sharper now because it was informed. I stood. I'm not asking anyone to be afraid, I said. I'm asking you to be attentive. If you see something unusual, report it. Not to the HOA, to authorities. The president nodded quickly, too quickly. After the meeting, a woman approached me, middle-aged, nervous. She's been calling people, she whispered. Karen, telling them you're dangerous, that you spy on everyone. I know, I replied. She said you ruined her life. She ruined her own, I said gently. The woman nodded, relief flooding her face. Truth has weight. It steadies people. That night, my cameras caught movement at 3:04 a.m. Two figures approached the edge of my property. They didn't cross it. They just stood there, talking. One pointed toward my house. The other shook his head. I zoomed in, faces clear. One was the man from before. The other was new. I recorded everything. They left after 6 minutes. I didn't sleep. Instead, I reviewed Karen's history. Not the public record. The patterns. Her escalation over time. Minor rule enforcement. Public shaming. Authority addiction. The spikes hadn't been an anomaly. They'd been inevitable. By morning, I had enough to act. I contacted my superiors through secure channels. Not for permission. For awareness. When personal and professional threats intersect, transparency matters. By noon, a decision was made. Kara would be confronted. Officially, not by me. That afternoon, unmarked vehicles parked discreetly near her temporary residence. She'd been staying with a cousin outside the neighborhood. She thought distance equaled safety. It doesn't. They knocked. She answered. Everything after that unfolded predictably. Denial, tears, accusations. Evidence dismantled each defense calmly, methodically. The photograph, the calls, the associates, intent documented. She broke when they showed her the spikes again. Evidence as a way of resurfacing guilt people think they've buried. By evening, she was in custody again. This time, charges expanded. Harassment, stalking, conspiracy to intimidate. The narrative she'd built collapsed under its own contradictions. Word traveled fast. The neighborhood felt it immediately. The air shifted. Relief replaced uncertainty. People slept better knowing the threat had been named and neutralized. I came home early that night, parked, walked the perimeter. Everything was quiet. Inside, I poured a glass of water and sat in control room, watching empty streets. Not because I expected trouble, but because reflection requires stillness. Karen had believed she was protecting order. In reality, she'd been protecting control. The difference matters. Control fears deviation. Order accommodates it. The HOA would survive this. So would the neighborhood. Institutions bend when tested, but they also learn. I filed my final report just before midnight. Concise, complete, closed. At 1:17 a.m., I shut down auxiliary feeds and left only essential monitoring active, a symbolic gesture, a return to baseline. The next morning, sunlight filled the street earlier than usual. Curtains opened, doors unlocked. Children laughed. Normalcy resumed. A new HOA notice appeared that afternoon. Short, clear. It stated that harassment of any kind would result in immediate law enforcement involvement. No exceptions. Progress often arrives quietly, too. That evening, I stood in my driveway and watched the neighbor back out without checking ground first. Trust restored. Slowly. I still checked. Habit isn't paranoia when it's earned. Karen eventually accepted a plea. She avoided prison, but lost every position of authority she'd ever held. Restrictions followed her. Distance from the neighborhood became permanent. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need closure from a courtroom. Closure comes from systems correcting themselves. Weeks later, the spikes were officially destroyed, melted down, rendered harmless. I watched the footage once, then archived it. Symbols matter. I returned fully to my work. New cases, new borders, new nights. But something stayed with me. This neighborhood had been a microcosm, a reminder that power unchecked always tests limits, and that vigilance doesn't require aggression, just attention. On my last night before deployment, I came home at 2 a.m. as usual, parked, checked the ground. Nothing there. I smiled once, briefly, then went inside. The cameras watched. And so did I. Always. Prepared. Exact. Unmoved. The world keeps testing lines. Somewhere, someone always believes they're above them. My job, whether abroad or at home, is to remind them otherwise. Quietly. Decisively. Without exception.